Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast, a podcast where Barry and I talk about the board games we've been playing, and Barry's here to do just that. How you doing, Barry?
All good, all good. Love games, I do.
Me too. And we've been playing some games, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to follow our normal format. So first, we're going to talk about the news, things that have been happening in the board game industry that have interested us, that are of interest to us, that we think maybe you could be interested in knowing about. If you are not interested, you can find all the time codes in the description of this podcast. These will point you to the games we've been playing. I'm going to talk about some mid to heavyweight Euros, and Barry's going to be talking about terraforming Mars in Middle Earth.
ba ba da ba. And some lighter games.
And some lighter games, exactly right. So you can find all of those linked down below. But without further ado, we've got no corrections or comments this week. That's very sad. Leave us a comment. We will read them. Maybe we'll respond to them too. That could be fun for you. And if you have nothing to say to us, that's fine. Just throw up a like. We like that too. Anyway, here's the news.
Yes, so a few things happening this week. We've been quite active in the board game world. One thing I spotted on Facebook was a comment from Herman Luttman, who is the designer of Dawn of the Zeds. And Dawn of the Zeds, despite being on their third edition already, is getting a new edition, the designer edition. And so Luttman is having a go at making the game more streamlined and the kind of thing that you can just kind of pull out on a random game night. You know, it's not going to be an event type game. It's something you can play regularly and with a standard board gaming group. Dawn of the Zeds, if you don't know, is one of the State of Siege games, which includes things like Zulu at the Ramparts, a couple of other sort of historical games. This is the only fictional one as far as I'm aware. It was previously published by Victory Point Games, who unfortunately don't exist anymore, but a lot of the designs for Victory Point Games were sold on, including this one, and this is with or reverted back to the owner, the designer Luttman here, and he is putting out this version with Blue Panther Games, I want to say.
With who?
Who's on this one? Yeah, I've not heard too much of them. It's definitely Blue Panther Games. I'm not sure what else they've done.
Yeah, I've not heard of them, but I've not heard of many publishers, so it's caught off guard there.
Well, the third edition of Dawn of the Zeds was very well received. It's one of the better State of Siege games, and I think it's the best rated State of Siege game. And there was a number of small expansions within it, but the game had grown and become quite bloated. There was Kickstarters run or crowdfunding run, and these small expansions were actually designed by the head of Victory Point Games, Alan Emmerich, and there was always 3 of them released, and there was 3 more semi-announced. There was 3 more floating around for a long time, and everybody that's played Dawn of the Zeds wanted these other 3 expansions. However, with the selling of Victory Point Games and the unfortunate passing of Alan Emmerich a few months ago, none of those mini expansions are going to come to fruition for the current edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I own Dawn of the Zeds 3rd edition. I have a really good time with it whenever I bring it out. There is a small learning curve every time I go back to it if I've not played for a while, but it's quite easy to pick up in the basic version of the game, and the game does escalate through different difficulties. You can go from green, amber, red to the crazy levels of difficulty. I never play that hard. I normally stick with the sort of easy mediums to have a play, and it is a game I mostly enjoy solo, but it does play okay with the other players, with you taking on different characters with different special abilities to tackle all the zombies coming towards you. So I'll be very excited with a game that can be more accessible perhaps to other people, but I don't think necessarily that it will replace my 3rd edition, which I still enjoy and don't necessarily need an update, but depending what he manages to do with it, I suppose.
Yeah, so I'm also familiar with Dawn of the Zeds. I have the 3rd edition. I have the mini expansions as well, but They truly are mini expansions. It's like, 10 cards in a booster pack. It's not like a serious box. But it's so it's it's a colony of survivors defending against waves of zombies. That's the siege in it, right? So the twist of the siege is it's zombies. And you're all collaborating and working together to survive the apocalypse. And it's nice. Yeah, I like it. I don't get it to the table as often as I would like. So maybe a simpler and more streamlined version is warranted. Having said that, when I do get it to the table, I don't feel as though it's overly complex or anything like that. I think it's just, you're right, that it does sort of function best as a solo game, and it's just not solo gaming is just not something I do very often. But this is one of the ones I do like to play solo when I do it. And it's nice, you get these sort of cinematic moments. It's quite good at capturing those scenes of a zombie apocalypse and giving you a sense of the people and the places and the things going on.
Yeah, very nice. Other games that are getting new additions include the Sheriff of Nottingham, and this is going to be a Disney version based on the Robin Hood cartoon. And so this is it's like the Matrix, it's the 6th different version. They've become exceedingly efficient at creating them. The original game was Contraband, and then it was, I think, German only or Dutch only, Hart an der Grenze, which is means borderline or close to the limit. And then it went to Robin Hood, but generic mythology Robin Hood, folklore Robin Hood. And then it went to Sheriff of Nottingham, which was just sort of the cartoony kind of version, and now it's gone to cartoon Robin Hood. And there was 2 versions of Sheriff of Nottingham as well in there in between. So it is just a Sheriff of Nottingham game. I don't know definitively that it is exactly the same as Sheriff of Nottingham. I'm hoping it becomes a little bit like Love Letter. They put a little twist on what the cards do or what's in them or something like that. But if you like Disney, or if you like Robin Hood, certainly some of the ladies out there will have thought Robin Hood was particularly formative for them. And if you like the Sheriff of Nottingham games, then this is a new version to look out for.
And get it before they try to make it live action.
Oh, there must be a live action Robin Hood, but anthropomorphized.
Not from Disney yet.
Yeah.
But there's time.
Yeah, we'll see. One game that I mentioned before, and one that I wanted to see at the Games Expo but wasn't there, was Ace of Spades. This is a solo-only game where you're making poker hands to defeat enemies. You have a character board, a player board, and whilst I'd seen some of it before, I hadn't seen the rules. The rules are now up, and it should be at Gen Con. And it looks like it's an interesting game to play. If I look at the setup and some of the cards that are in it, my only potential concern for this being a solo game that I would want to play often is it seems like the order of enemies are the same every time you play, and I wonder if that will hamper some of the enjoyment. But I may, not having the game in my hands, I can't say that definitively, but the way that you go about making those poker hands and fighting all seems to be a pretty solid system, and so I definitely want to give it a shot if I can get hold of a copy.
Well, I'm really excited about this next one.
Wow, this is a small expansion, but big game. Well, maybe not in size, but popularity at least. This is the game that has climbed the most the last 6 months running, I think, or 4 months running on Board Game Geek as rankings, and that is Lord of the Rings Duel. And so the first expansion has been announced for Lord of the Rings Duel, Middle-earth Allies, or just Allies, in fact. It's Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth. And it is just a booster pack expansion, so I can only assume there's 8 cards in this pack. There's not a huge amount of information out there. Seem to have the Balrog and a little unclear who's on the front there. Could be Arwen, maybe.
Could be Arwen. Could be Galadriel. Looks like an elf.
Yeah.
Those are 2 of the 3 female characters in Lord of the Rings. We know it's not Eowyn because she was on the box of the core game.
Exactly. But this is the first piece of artwork where people dueling are facing each other. And so actually having a duel. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see what's in here. I'm still trying to chase down the promo landmarks for the base game, for the Shire and whatever the other one was.
Grand was the better name.
Grand. But looking forward to that. I think I've mentioned, like, I've played a bit now of the Duel for Middle-earth. I'm coming away from it colder than base Seven Wonders. I think there's a lot more in there.
You mean base Seven Wonders Duel?
Base Seven Wonders Duel, yeah. I think it comes down to either your opponent makes a mistake, which might let you win before the end, or the map becomes it's always going to the map, right? So how many pieces you've got, whether you can control the map at the end. Whereas I found that even when Seven Wonders Duel went to points at the end, it was still potentially more interesting than the area control element. But hopefully this expansion mixes things up a little bit.
That's really interesting. I do not feel like I've had quite enough experience with the base game to suggest. I mean, I've got it, and I've got the expansions for it, and have played them all quite a few times. I do get you. I think you are right. Lord of the Rings Duel does feel like it can shake out in a way that feels more luck driven. What I'm trying to say is I don't know whether that's accurate or not. It feels that way. It might be that the base game was just as luck driven, but perhaps it was better at concealing it or making you feel like it wasn't. Either way, I do enjoy playing both games, and I do enjoy Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
So I am happy to play Lord of the Rings Duel, and I'm keen to see these allies, which seem to be something that's, at a guess. At a guess, I don't know if it mimics anything from the original game or the original Seven Wonders Duel or either of its expansions, but we'll have to see. Either way, more characters and more Lord of the Rings is always welcome.
Yeah, not as an appeal to authority, but the advantage of Seven Wonders Duel being on Board Game Arena, I am 250 to 300 games deep on the base set of that. Whereas I'm only a dozen plays in Seven Wonders Duel, Middle-earth Duel. So, I've certainly not played the latter as much as the former, but I'm also not craving to play it as much as the former. And some of that's convenience, but some of that's just, no, it's gone to the map again. Okay. And that's that. Speaking of sort of sequels and expansions, things were looking a little shaky for my pre-order of Compile 2 after Flat River Group shuttered Greater Than Games. But thankfully, this no word on any of their other games yet, including Spirit Island, but...
Well, to be fair, the official statement from Flat River Group, just on the topic of Greater Than Games catalog, which is interesting because it leads into this article as well, was that we will not be producing more stuff, but we are going to keep the existing catalog and the perennial favorites in print. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Greater Than Games pretty much only has perennial favorites. People still love Sentinels of the Multiverse. They love Spirit Island, and Compile is really popular. I also think that they, they didn't have that many other titles, or if they did, they obviously weren't perennial favorites because I've forgotten about them. But it's interesting that after making their official statement, we're going to keep the catalog in print and available, they then took one out and gave it to someone else.
Yeah. So, I guess technically Compile 2 had not yet been printed.
Sure.
So where the rights were sitting for that, a little unclear, but Synapse's games have
right, but it comes with Compile 1, so it's not like they've kept Compile 1 and they're going to keep that in print. Flat River Group and Greater Than Games, or whatever's left of Greater Than Games, So
sure.
They've just said, well, we'll give all the Compile stuff over to Synapse's games, I assume. Are they associated with Flat River Group? Because it is an umbrella organization.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, but I don't know. Right, so just press release saying that Compile 2 is coming. So my pre-order looking a little more secure now. whenever it might come out, and I'll add that and Ox 2 to the draft.
Yeah. Well, they're supposed to be. It's a set. It's a standalone set. I don't know if it will introduce a lot of new mechanisms. I've played, enough Compile to enjoy it, and I understand that this new set will be completely integratable with the old set, so simply broadening it. But like I said, I don't know if it will have more mechanisms or just be more variety. Either is kind of welcome. I actually don't know if it does need more mechanisms, really. It's great the way it is. So I'm pleased to see it's in print. I'm pleased to see Synapses have picked it up. I think the inconsistency in the statements from Flat River Group is a little foreboding, but there's a lot of that sort of thing happening in the industry right now, so we won't dwell on it too much, and we will be just pleased that the game will be available.
Then on to some crowdfunding games that you'll still hopefully be able to get involved with, should you be so inclined. Tabletop Inc., which previously run successful crowdfunding, is a meta board game about producing board games, and in it you have little boxes for your games. You can put them on the shelves, and they're not official games, unlike Bezier Games' new one that we discussed in the last podcast. But there's now an expansion, and the expansion deals with crowdfunding campaigns. So very meta. They're running a crowdfunding campaign to fund a game about crowdfunding campaigns for board games. There should still be time to get in on it, should you be so inclined. The game itself, I've not had a chance to play, but I did have a sort of little demo browse around at the expo, and it does seem quite fun. Then sort of a non-announcement from Fantasy Flight Games. Fantasy Flight Games every year perform or put out an in-flight report at Gen Con. And this is just a state of the union for the company. Here's what's coming up. Here's where we're at with certain product lines. And here's, a couple of big announcements for what's going to come out for the rest of the year. And this year they've announced that there will be no in-flight report. Now, you may have heard Mike and I lamenting a couple of times that FFG is a shell of its former glory. They do not produce a significant number of board games anymore, instead focusing just on Star Wars Unlimited for the most part, and a couple of titles, potentially Arkham Horror and perhaps Twilight Imperium. We're still optimistic that something Twilight Imperium might happen before the end of the year. Yeah, so it's just I don't know, another, what's the opposite of a string to the bow?
It's another sign of the slow decline.
Yeah, another.
It's a portent.
Minor cut, death of 1,000 cuts,
Yeah.
But anyway, November at PAX, they are saying they will have one. And I hope that means that they just don't have something ready to announce right now because it's been delayed or whatever, and they will instead have it ready for the end of the year.
Are we imagining that the in-flight report is just the Twilight Imperium news announcement then?
And the next 6 sets of Star Wars Unlimited.
Right.
That'll be... That's likely to be what is announced, but we'll see. Then one that is not near and dear to my heart, but just something I'd seen in the upcoming pending releases, and it was the Seven Wonders 2nd edition, but this is also backward compatible with first edition. The Great Wall of China Wonder Board will be available for 2nd edition. Now, in the first edition, there was a wonder pack that came with a number of different wonders, including the Great Wall of China, Mannequin Peace, and some other ones around. But the Great Wall of China and Stonehenge have never been available for 2nd edition. With the release of the Great Wall of China, only Stonehenge, I think, is missing from 1st edition into 2nd edition. You'll never see Babel. Babel is not coming to 2nd edition. Edifice is now live on Board Game Arena as well, if you want to play Edifice. But that was also backwards compatible with 1st edition, and that is as close as you'll get to Babel, I think, for the 2nd edition game. You're not missing much, to be fair. But at least they're releasing it, right? So a couple of different costs. The Wonder itself is still the same. The stages of the Wonder are the same. If you had a first edition copy, you do not need to pick up this board at all. But if you have a second edition and you want an additional Wonder, that should be available quite soon. So here's an interesting one, the game I didn't think we'd ever maybe see again, and that is a Camp Grizzly second edition. I don't know if you've ever played Camp Grizzly, Mike.
I have. Have you played it?
Many moons ago. No, never played it.
I mean, so it's quite beloved, right? It's been out of print. People talk about it. This is, a cooperative game where there is an automated killer wandering around in the woods at the summer camp in America, and you are trying to get around the camp. You're, sneaking through the woods and searching through the buildings to try and find the things you need to put together to escape. There are a few different modes of escape, and these things are randomly hidden in different decks of cards. And it's roughly like that. I might be getting some of the finer details incorrect, which is striking because it's a very, very simple game. But you do have some amount of actions you can take to draw cards and handle cards. You can trade cards between players if you're in the same location, and then at the end of your turn you draw like a card from the murderer deck, and the murderer does something. There's also some NPCs like the policeman and the camp counselor or something who'll show up, and maybe they'll get themselves killed as well. I can't remember. There's some impact if you encounter them, but I don't know if they're actually friendly or if they just make your life more difficult. I can't remember. It's fine. I can kind of see where the love for it comes from, because it's cooperative and there can be some quite sort of tense moments when things could go either way. But it's also an incredibly luck-driven game, and the rules are pretty fuzzy in a lot of places. And so, I think a second edition with some of that stuff ironed out could be great. I think the reason why this is most unexpected is because the company who originally published it, I think, were doing it in the early days of crowdfunding. I don't actually know if it was crowdfunded. I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
And
this is all published.
You could sort of get away with this game that is almost wholly in the Ameritrash school of game design, and yet also features cards that are quite graphic. They're not super graphic. I'd heard rumors about the sort of, adult nature of the game. And going into it, it's all kind of implication. There's some cards that imply some quite violent outcomes, but the art is not super graphic. And actually, we've seen much more graphic stuff in board games since, especially recently. I feel like there's been a slate of grim dark or grim gothic or violent games. So it's not really kept up to that element, that sort of urban legend or element of its reputation. But it was an odd marriage, sort of adult style content, adult theme, with a game that's actually probably most fun for a broad range of players, and a broad age range of players. So as a product, it was a bit baffling.
Yeah, so it's gone to the like you mentioned, crowdfunding. The only game they ever published was Camp Grizzly, and then went away.
Yep.
And so it's been picked up by Trick or Treat Studios, who are publishing this with all the expansions. And Trick or Treat Studios publish games based on horror IPs, not exclusively, but a lot of them. They've got Halloween, Chucky, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, House of a Thousand Corpses, all these sort of horror franchises, and so Camp Grizzly fits very nicely in there.
Yeah, so this will be a natural fit for them then. I mean, personally, I would suggest you try it before you buy it. If you have a group who like, games that are, very beer and pretzels, by which I mean, they're easygoing. You're not thinking too hard. You're just kind of having a game night where you're hanging out, and it's not going to be a problem because it's cooperative. You're all on the same team, so getting the rules exactly right doesn't matter too much, and you can just, I mean, obviously some people do really hate when the rules are wrong, especially in a cooperative game, but you will know your group, you will know your table, and this could be a nice fit for you. But I would say, yeah, definitely have a look into it before you go out and buy it, because it is very much on the lighter side, and in a way, it's certainly in terms of its strategic depth. but also in a way that the rules are a little too rulesy for a game that is functionally just kind of move around and then draw a card.
Well, we'll see. They've got 10 years worth of FAQs to draw from and make any changes. We'll see if it's just a straight reprint or...
Yeah, I'd be really interested to know if they're actually going to do anything to update it or streamline it or offer new content. I mean, as a sort of a theme, I enjoy it very much as a setting and a theme. But for me, it's just not quite enough game there. And then I have been playing Terrorscape recently, which is a similar kind of vibe, haunted house. But that's a one versus many, so someone actually controls the monster. And I do think that is better. You are, as the teenager, I say better. I think it captures the horror vibe better as well, because it's a hidden movement game, but it's the good guys that are hidden. The teenagers, the heroes that are caught in the haunted house who are hidden. So as the vulnerable characters, you feel very tense about being discovered. And that captures, I think, that sort of feeling of sort of scary tension much better than something like Camp Grizzly, which doesn't really have the same vibe. It doesn't really doesn't reach that vibe.
I was just having kind of a little look there as well, and right enough, there's a Friday the 13th game now, which this is kind of where the inspiration came from, but then there's also the Dead by Daylight board game, again sort of a one versus many horror game as well. So there's other options now that perhaps didn't exist when Camp Grizzly first came out. So whether or not it holds up, you do have choices.
Indeed.
Speaking of choices, the Boop, the game of cats and kittens booping each other off a bed, are releasing 4 sets of alternate cat meeples. So it's pairs of meeples within each set. So you could have 8 different cats and kitten combos. Looking at them, one is Bert and Marnie, and they're kind of the grumpy cats. So whilst there's no picture up of these meeples yet, I'll probably pick up a set just to have a little bit of variety with my Boop game.
Barry's so committed to Boop that Barry will buy Meeples sight unseen.
Yeah, well, there's cats more than Boops.
Grumpy cats. I mean,
just having grumpy cat Meeples. Who knows what I could use them in? Anything.
Literally use them.
Root. I'm going to make a Root faction just of grumpy cats.
Oh God! Now I want them.
There we go. Multi-use. Something that may be of interest to Luthier owners. Paverson Games are replacing some of the pieces. So if you find that your worker tokens are not or potentially distinguishable, the colour on them is not even, and you kind of know what they are from looking at the back of them. Paverson Games have decided or done a bit of investigating and agree that some pieces have not come out the way they wanted. They are redoing those pieces, and they'll be, instead of sort of printing them, they're going to be painted to have an even colour over them. And if you feel that your worker tokens are subpar, you can get in touch and they'll send you a new set as soon as they are available. If you head on over to paversongames.com, you'll find the announcement on their blog, and you'll be able to fill in the form to get those replacement pieces. So obviously if your game's fine, you don't need them. It's not adding anything.
Yep, but it's just a straight replacement for those worker pieces, because of course you are placing them blind, and some of the different types of workers had slightly distinct colors. And I think it was specifically the way the game works is most of them are numerical values, and you're kind of bidding against other players with these numerical values. But then a few of them have like a special function where they take on a special power based on a card that you can pick up, something like that. And so I think those ones were slightly off color from the rest of the set, and it was quite obvious when you were using that one. So that's what I saw on the social medias. So it's nice of them to offer that free reprint. That's because it is really important to the game that those are all the same color.
Which is good. And then just finally, of course, we've had the Spiel des Jahres winners announced. And main 2 picks are the winners. Bombbusters is your official Spiel des Jahres winner. Great game.
Yeah.
Great game.
Listen, screw the haters. We were right.
Exactly.
We know what we're talking about.
Flip off, more like. And then the Kenner Spiel, the slightly more advanced game, right? The more, don't want to say, more hobby game, right? So for people like you and I, was Endeavour Deep Sea. And I forget what won the Kinderspiel. It was like top the tort, like something to do with a cake. But I'm never playing that, so it doesn't matter. Although I think did Captain Flip win normal Spiel des Jahres last year?
I can't remember.
I can't remember. I think it might have actually. Yeah.
But if they put those kids games on, BGA Barra would try them. So
yes,
get on it.
I'll play them all. And that was it. But quite a lot happening, and things are kicking up. Obviously with Gen Con into Essen into PAX. Probably keep things busy for the tail half of the year.
Yeah, we should see a lot of sort of forthcoming announcements and news and bits and pieces coming up. So that'll be good. We'll be keeping our eye out on the Essen releases and so forth as well. So that's all very exciting. But for now, we're going to get into the games that we've been playing.
So, games. Who doesn't love games? In fact, I love games so much, I'll play them on my own, all sad like, with none of my friends. That's okay. And but I have been playing a new solo game. In fact, I think I've got it somewhere. I'm resting my camera up on it. And I knew it was somewhere. This game is called R.A.V.E.L, and that is R.A.V.E.L, and I forget what it stands for, but it is a backronym if ever I heard one. Doesn't make any sense as to what it is. But this is a game published by Impatience and designed by Daniel McKinley. And whilst the art in it is fairly limited, it's mostly graphic design with one sort of card back, which also doubles as the cover of the game. The artist is Christine Alcouf, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she's done things like Tissue, Welcome to, Mind Up, a whole bunch of things. So definitely capable. And this is a fun little one-player puzzle game. So in this game, you have 8 dice, 2 each of 4 colours, red, black, white, blue. You roll them, and one at a time, and place them into the outside of a 3x3 grid. So imagine a 3x3 grid with a space in the middle. Then you're going to take some cards that come with the game, shuffle them up, 16 of them, deal them out into the north, south, east, west piles, or up, down, left, right, whatever you want to think about it. Face up, collect 8 cogs. These cogs are going to power your ability to manipulate the dice. You can spend 2 cogs to turn a die to any number, or 1 cog to swap 2 adjacent dice. And the aim of the game is to complete the requirements on each of the cards, using the dice on that side of the grid. So as I said, up, down, left, right. So the requirements might be something as simple as have both of the red dice on that side of the board. Quite straightforward, but they can go up to being as complex as having 2 dice that add up to the value of the third dice, and all of which have to be different colours. And so moving those dice around, manipulating those numbers, is how you're going to complete the card tasks. Now, each time you complete a card and complete a requirement, you get to remove that card from the pile and reveal the next one in the stack. Completing a card also gives you a reward, and that could just be get some extra cogs. You're going to need them to change the dice around to anything, or shuffle up all the cards again, redeal them into different piles. It's a good way of kind of, well, I need the red dice on the bottom, but I'm never going to get them there without spending all my cogs to move them around, but maybe it'll end up in a different pile. Or just even moving the cog cards, because maybe you've got something solved already, but you just need the right card in the right place. So every time you complete a card, you get a reward, but you have to use that reward immediately. You can't bank them for later. The game itself, the aim of the game is to complete all 16 cards. And the game itself comes with 16 basic cards and 16 advanced cards. And to control the difficulty of the game to whatever level you're at, you can incorporate any number of those advanced cards, and you can change the starting number of cog tokens you have to be able to spend and manipulate the dice. And it's as straightforward as that, really. I've played the game about a dozen times. It takes like 10 minutes, 15 minutes if you've got to sit and think about it for a little bit. And although I've not found it to be terribly difficult at this point, my preferred way of playing now is to shuffle all the cards together, the advanced and basic, and just get what I get, right? So I'm still playing with 8 cogs. Maybe if I start winning too much, I might reduce that number. My win ratio is positive. I made, I wouldn't say a mistake, but I played with the basic game first. I won the first game, and I was like, all right, fine. I'll just use the advanced ones. And then I did the advanced ones, and I got to 13 out of 16 and failed miserably. I'm pretty sure all 16 advanced cards is possible, though. And I will do it at some point. But at the moment, I'm just enjoying a 10-minute break when I'm having a cup of tea. 3 o'clock in the middle of the day. It's very easy to set up, very small footprint. You can play it on the plane. You could play it on the train. You could play it while you're driving. No, not while you're driving.
If you've got one of those AI cars.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. The self-driving cars, you'll be all right, but I still wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, this is not legal advice. Please be aware. So yeah, pretty good. I think it's a keeper. It's not anything. It's not something I would say everybody has to play, but if you are looking for a little puzzle game that you can play in 10-15 minutes, it is solid, and there's enough variety in there. The order the cards come out is important. You can get a little stuffed by just not everything being in the wrong place it's set up. Because it's random and because the requirements are random. Yes, there will be some times when no matter how many cogs you give yourself, you probably aren't going to do it. But I've not found that to be a limiting factor, and instead the puzzle is a fun way to pass some time.
Nice. Did you get this at UKG?
No, I picked it up afterwards. I think it was on my list for UKGE, but I didn't see it, or I didn't get round to buying it.
Oh, nice. Well, it's always nice to have a sort of a quick puzzle. I have a couple of games that I keep around for that sort of function, albeit probably not any that I can play in 10 minutes.
Got to keep the grey matter sharp.
Yeah, exactly. Got to keep it sharp. And what better way to keep your grey matter sharp than playing mid to heavy hero? So I've been playing Men-Nefer. This is a 2024 release designed by German P. Milan, who designed Bitoku, Bamboo, Sabtika, and others. And the art is by Laura Bevan, who did Sabtika, Ceylon, Between Two Cities of Mankin, Ludwig, and more. It's an experienced board game artist. The publisher is Luda Nova. And this was not my copy of the game. This was a friend's copy of the game, so I don't actually own it. And this is a 1 to 4 player game, so as a solo mode, the community says best at 3. We'll discuss that. It says on the box it takes 1 to 2 hours to play. Maybe. Sure. I'd say it depends. Depends entirely on your capacity for heavyweight euros and your player count. I think 60 to 120 minutes is... I don't think it'll be much longer. I don't think it would... I don't think it would get to 3 hours unless you're playing really slow or, very casually. And maybe if you're 4 players. Now, this was one thing that did surprise me. So I mentioned Bitoku, obviously, because this is the same designer, and we'll get into that a bit more later on. But the weight is 3.71 on BGG, Board Game Geek, and Bitoku's 3.77. So this puts it at pretty similar weights, and we'll talk about that. In summary, this is a game set in ancient Egypt. It is either a light heavyweight game or a heavy middleweight game. It's right on that borderline,
Yeah.
And it really feels like sort of 4 to 5 mini games that have been tied together around a sort of a central mechanism of collecting the handful of things you need to score the points that you're going to score to win. It is like all of these different little mini games all kind of get you the same stuff. So functionally, it is going to be a 3-round game, and each round is a little prep round where you get some income, stuff like that. Then bulk of the game, action selection, and then end of the round is scoring. And so each round ends with scoring, 3 rounds. After the 3rd round scoring, game over. There is no end game scoring, I don't think. I think it's just the scoring phases. So the minute that's done, game is over, person with the most points wins. In the action phase, you'll take 9 actions. They are place one of your apprentices into one of the specialisms, specialize the apprentice within the specialism, so they step along a track, basically. There's only 2 spaces. So either you've added them to the sort of the special house, or then they move within the special house to trigger a benefit. And the final thing is take a new action tile. Because when you put the apprentice out, you trigger the action tile they were stood on, and then it's removed from your player board. Then you get a new action tile, but taking it is an action. So you've functionally got 9 actions per round. Place the apprentice, activate the apprentice's house, and take a new action tile for the apprentice for next round. Fine. And then the specialization within those places where you're putting the apprentices, those correspond to the 4.5 mini games. So they'll be doing something that triggers, the pyramid mini game, or the temple mini game, or the fishing mini game, or the entombing of the mummies mini game, or the carving of the sphinxes mini game. Every time they step into that specialism, you will develop more capacity, better functionality every time you do the sphinxes or whatever. So there are like 4 resources in the game, I think. And by resources, really all I mean is stuff that you're getting. You're getting fish, you're getting onks, you're getting what I'm going to call feathers, but I think there's something to do with the papyrus. It's like thematically you're writing the Book of the Dead, and the feathers help you with that. And when you write the Book of the Dead by collecting papyrus, you get more feathers. So it's all something, thematically, it's something to do with that. And then also you get hearts, which come from entombing the mummies. So they might actually be real human hearts. I don't know. But the onks and the fish are actual currencies that you'll spend to do things in the game, whereas the hearts and the feathers are a track, and you will go up the track by collecting those, up the respective tracks by collecting those. So this is a Ludonova production. It's a nice production. It's very beige and readable, but it's got a lot of nice wooden pieces, and they're pleasant to play with. And it's not ugly beige. Like, they've done a decently good job of making it sort of appealing. And of course, it's set in the Egyptian desert, so the beige is not totally unwarranted. There is a lot of iconography, and some of it is subtly different. There is, for example, the action of moving your priestess into the temple. And in some cases, she can make an offering, and it depends on whether the icon is holding a little golden pot or not. And it's not too bad to get your head around this stuff, but there is quite a lot of iconography to get your head around. But honestly, after one game, we'd pretty much internalized it. So that's fine. There are a few other little like minor rules that are quite easy to forget. So that might be why it's pushing up towards like the higher, over 3 bracket, just because it's got these little things to remember. Here's 4 bullet points for people that played Bitoku. If you didn't, you can scrub ahead like 30 seconds. This won't take long. But differences between this and Bitoku, because you will have noticed that the action selection mechanism is the exact same system. But now the dice are gone, the amulets are gone because the dice are gone. There's no decks of cards or anything like that in this. The Bitoku has a very strong sense of timing and first come, first served elements that promote that sense of timing and where you can get and when you can do it. This still has that, but it's less present, so it feels a little less severe and a little bit more manageable. And then, of course, Bitoku is incredibly colorful, and this is not. So those are the main differences. Obviously, other than thematically the setting, Bitoku being set in Japanese mysticism and this being set in ancient Egypt and reasonably historical. So I like Bitoku. I know I lent it to you and you played it and you didn't care for it very much, but we can talk about that in a minute. But I like Bitoku, so I think it's natural I would like this, given that it does feel like Bitoku's little brother, which is kind of interesting because obviously it's the second game, but it feels lighter, which is why I was surprised to see that it's only 0.6 lighter on BGG. It feels a lot lighter than Bitoku. And I don't know if that's because the element of players blocking each other in the action selection area feels less severe. It feels like you can get away with a bit more there, or it's a bit more manageable. So maybe that's why it feels lighter. But I think it's also because it doesn't have the cards. There's a lot of cards in Bitoku. Bitoku feels like that's a lot more rules overhead than this. It might just also be the fact that Bitoku has a really bad rule book. But I genuinely got the impression that Men-Nefer was much lighter, or at least much more lighter than these numbers seem to indicate. So there's that. The other thing is like it's a bit of I feel a bit like Men-Nefer is to an extent a little bit smoke and mirrors, because it's like here's all these different things you can do. You can build the big pyramid, you can build the queen's pyramids, you can build the sarcophaguses and you'll get hearts. You can kind of work on this little mini game. You know, it's not even included in the 4.5 mini games, but an extra little mini game where you just collect papyrus and write the Book of the Dead. And that's going to get you the feathers, you know? And functionally, all this stuff just turns into points. And you're just working out the sort of, which one's going to get me the most points now kind of thing. And the Ankhs are pretty useless. They're just used to buy papyrus, which just gets you feathers. You can get feathers in like 9 other ways. So you don't even have to worry about that if you don't want to. And the fish is what is really crucial. Like I think you do have to go into the fishing mini game a bit, because when you put out your workers, you have to pay some amount of fish to place them. If you are the first to be there, it's 0. If you're the second in, it's increasing in cost and so on and so forth. So you need fish to take all the actions that you want to take, and potentially quite a lot of them. So that's nice. That's a logistical problem you've got to overcome. It creates a bit of player interaction. At less than 4 players, there's also some phony apprentices that wander around the buildings, and so you have to worry about their placement and paying for that. And, you know, I find this to be quite a satisfying game. You know, I liked Bitoku, I like this, and I like the player interaction. I do think though that this can feel a little bit like you can just, well, the way it kind of shook out in the end is like nobody got a really bad score, and there wasn't really a runaway leader in any of the games of this I played. And I think that's probably going to be quite typical of it, just because it's kind of hard to make big mistakes unless you really don't have any fish and you can't do anything. But the worst thing that happens when you run out of fish is you have to sack off a worker and then you get fish. So, you know, even that setback, like everyone's going to get some points. Everything you do gives you something that you can do more with and gives you some route to points. So I really think the winner of this game is the one that sort of micromanages those extra points through observing some extra combinations and efficiencies, you know? Does that sound like something you might be interested in?
I'm thinking, so I'm having a look at Bitoku again, like, so I cannot remember how to play Bitoku. I'm
not surprised.
And I'm just like, I have a headache. It's bright, it's loud, it's colourful. So but I don't think I struggled necessarily with Bitoku. So having a lighter version wasn't something I was looking for necessarily. In a game, visually, Men-Nefer is more appealing to my eyes and minds. And I did want to give it a go. And it sounds like I don't think I had any massive problems with Bitoku's systems, but I can't really remember how the dice interacted with what you were doing to know whether removing that was why I never really got along with it or not.
Well, just to
No.
be on that point, so German P. Milan, what they tend to do as a designer is add in these steps where everything just becomes a little bit more logistically difficult. Like if you want to play the Sphinx carving game in Men-Nefer, you have to first carve a Sphinx and then you can place it on the board. And you might get an opportunity that will tell you either carve or place, but not both. And generally speaking, the carving action is more available. So you're like, okay, I'm going to prioritize these lesser actions like carving the Sphinx or entombing the mummy, so that when I get the opportunity to put the entombed mummy into the halls of the dead, or when I get the opportunity to build the Sphinx in the city, I can use that for the more optimal action, the bigger action. And to an extent, the dice in Bitoku are the same sort of thing. Like they limited where you could go and they would combo with the cards and you could spend amulets to tick them up. And it was just another logistical challenge. Like to get the actions I really, really want, I need to make sure that I have a stockpile of amulets. So where can I get those amulets? And so it is in line with their design ethos. And they've done kind of the same thing here, right? But they've just, instead of making it random, because I think that might have been the element that put people off. Certainly I can see why the kind of person that's into this sort of game would be put off by the dice. Although I'm trying to remember if we ever actually roll the dice in Bitoku. I think you do. Don't you roll them at the start of a round? Anyway, the point is that the amulets you might pay to change the die face to get the number you want have now become the fish that you have to pay to go into the spaces if somebody else has already gone there. But that's the big difference, because in Bitoku, I believe that it's sort of a race to get across the river, and because when you put the die out onto the board, you get to take the action you want, and then you can cross the river and draft the card you want. And so if you get into that chain quicker than another player, you'll get the stuff you want first, and you might poach something they wanted. And that's where that timing comes from. This is a little less savage because you're not drafting cards or from that market on the board, and you're not blocking actions. You might poach the place someone wanted if you put your sarcophagus where they wanted to put their sarcophagus, but functionally everyone can do the same actions. So when you put the apprentice out, anyone can go there and do that. It just will cost them more fish. Likewise, when you cross over the specialism, everyone can do that. Everyone will get the benefit of doing that, but they might have to pay a bit extra fish. So it's a little nicer in terms of letting people get what they want.
Yeah, I'm for that. Like, I'm not against indirect player conflict in a sort of game like this, and particularly where it doesn't shut you out of anything that you particularly wanted to do. Sure, some worker placement games are better for, what's what I'm after there, exclusive spots, but not all games. Yeah, I'd be keen to give this a go. It's on my list of games I want to have a play. I just want somebody else to buy it.
Fair enough. And so I have Bitoku already, so I'm probably not going to be picking up Men-Nefer because I still like Bitoku. I'm happy to play that. I would also happily play Men-Nefer. I've put here that you should check it out if you like Marrakesh, Lacrimosa, Shackleton Base, Barcelona, Seti. I would say Lacrimosa is the one of those that really feels like it's in the same sort of weight bracket. Those other ones are a bit heavier. Maybe Barcelona. Barcelona's not that heavy. But Marrakesh and Shackleton Base and Seti are certainly heavier and longer than Men-Nefer. I think Men-Nefer's, I've written here, it's good for at least 5 plays. I think unless you're exceptionally good at this genre or you're sort of burned out on these sorts of games, I think, you'll get a decent number of plays out of this. I don't know if it'll be a perennial keeper. I think ultimately it's going to feel a bit like, and this is sort of what I was saying earlier, a bit like whatever you're engaging in and whatever you're doing, there's no optimal strategy, right? It's not like, the temple is going to be great every time. There might be some small nuances on the board, like, for example, the Queen's Pyramid. There's 3 of them, and you can build into them, and then they give you distinct scoring conditions at the end of every round. And so you can look at what the Queen's Pyramids are looking at this game. They might be looking at the temple, they might be looking at the sarcophagus, or even the fishing routes. I think maybe they don't look at that. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is, you can build into the Queen's temples, and you might look at there's a heuristic where you might look at those and go, yes, these are the mini games that are going to matter in this game. But actually, you can get a great score by not even working on the Queen's Temples at all. So it's not like anything's essential, and you can kind of just do whatever you want. And I think some players might really appreciate that sandboxy nature of the game, where it's kind of hard to really make poor strategic choices. But I also think it kind of hampers the long-term replayability of the game. Like, you're not going to get massively better at it. You're going to pick up on these pretty straightforward Euro game heuristics, and then you're probably just going to have a fun time pushing cubes around and looking at where other people played, and that's kind of it. So I do think this is going to fit in with a group that want a sort of a middleweight Euro that they can and welcome a new puzzle, but you're going to play it 5 or 6 times maybe, and then maybe move it on. Personally, because I have so many of these sorts of games, I have no real interest in buying it. I've got Lacrimosa still, I've got Barcelona, I've got Patoku. I've also put here that I've got Civilution, which is much heavier. That's a Stefan Feld game, but Civilution also feels a bit mini-gamey, although it is 4X themed, so I guess there's a little bit more theme connecting them together. But I think, if you like this sort of thing, and maybe you want something that's a little bit more approachable, then this one is, going to offer you that. Finally, it is an abstract Euro game, so everything is somehow justified as something from ancient Egyptian history, but I don't think you're going to get a sense of being like, an Egyptian lord or building whatever, I don't know, the pharaohs or whatever. I don't think you're supposed to be a pharaoh in this game. You're literally running fishing vessels and things. And like the fishing boats pick up contracts. Like, I guess that's because they visit different cities, but I don't know if that happened in ancient Egypt. Anyway, my point is that there's enough ancient Egypt theme that if you're with someone who's really into it, they might be able to talk about it. It might trigger some talking points and some conversations. But if you really want to learn a lot about ancient Egypt or get a feeling of being part of that society, I don't think you're going to get it here. It's just not that thematic.
Fair enough. One Tutankhamun exhibition coming up.
Well, I think when I think about games set in ancient Egypt, I'm not really sure what the feeling we're trying to invoke is, but I don't think I have any games that are massively thematic. Ancient Egyptian games. I mean, Ra certainly is not a very thematic game, and Ankh is the other one that springs to mind. But of course, you're playing as the ancient Egyptian gods, and you're just kind of fighting over followers. And so, yes, I guess it's probably the most thematic of the bunch, but also it's completely fantastic. So, it's not still realistic at all. Anyway, that was Men-Nefer, a 2024 game designed by German P. Milan and published by Ludonova.
Nice.
All right, so speaking of ancient Egypt, one thing they were famous for, I think, was their feline companions, and you know something about that.
Well, I've already spoken about my love of cats and cat meeples in particular, but this is another new game on Board Game Arena, and it is Scratch and Catch. So this is published by The Flying Games, designed by Nicolas Boria and Fred Boule, and the artist on this one is Jonathan Ocomte, who also did Captain Flip and the other Marrakesh, the 2007 carpet salesman Sam wanders round
Which I'm pretty sure is great. I'm pretty sure we played that and it was great.
Oh, I like Marrakesh. Yeah, I played hundreds of games. It's a lot of fun, and in real life, of course, the little bits of fabric that you're putting down to lay them out is fun as well. But this is as a Board Game Arena. It's a connection making game, just launched, and the theme, for what it's worth, is about cats and shedding fleas. But it is entirely irrelevant to the game. The art for the cats in the game have them performing at discos, doing flamenco. I don't know, just like completely unrelated to having fleas. Now, the game is a 2 to 6 player, I don't want to say party game, but this connection making game, and I'll kind of explain it so people understand. I'm not 100% sure of the composition of the cards because you can't look at them individually on Board Game Arena, but there's 64 cat cards and an additional 12 cat cards that also function as scratch cards. split between the numbers 1 through 10. So it's not an even split. There's 76 cards across 10 numbers. And I don't know how that breaks down. And I really should find out because it's somewhat important to the game. In the centre of the player area, you line up a grid for every number cat. So 1 through 10. For setup, you flip over 4 cards and place them in the appropriate slots. So if you flip over a 1, 3, 5 and 7, you put them in the 1, 3, 5 and 7 space. You then deal each player 4 cards, and then depending on the number of players, each player starts with a certain number of fleas. And fleas are negative points if you still have them at the end of the game. Not 1 to 1, but if you've got no fleas, 15 points. If you've got 1 to 5 fleas, 12 points. And you can end up with minus points if you're over sort of 15 fleas by the time the game ends. Now, on a player's turn, they have to play 2 cards, and that can either be from their hand or just at random from the top of the deck. Depending on what the second card played is, depends on what happens. The first card is just kind of like a filler. You want to put it somewhere that's not advantageous for your opponents, but it doesn't harm you, or you can put it down somewhere that may be advantageous for you. But the second card will do different things depending on where it's placed, or what it's placed on, I should say. So if the second card is played into an empty space, so where I said 1, 3, 5 and 7, if your second card was 4, then you would make a run of 3, 4, 5, and you would be able to remove 3 fleas. So the length of the run is how many fleas you can remove. If the first card you put down was a 2, then you've made a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can remove 5 fleas. Just put them back in the box. And so if your second card's in an empty space, you remove fleas. If your second card is on top of an existing card, you're going to claim the cards on either side. So let's say I played a 4 as my first card and a 4 as my second card. I would take the 3 and the 5 and I would place them into my scoring pile. And every card that you claim counts as a point. But then the 3 and the 5 would be freed up as an empty space again, so people can use it to remove fleas by creating a run. Additionally, the scratch cards that I mentioned are just cat cards, but if they're the second card that you played and they're identified by a black border, but they're still just numbered cat cards, depending on the size of the stack that is played into, each of your opponents will gain that many fleas. So if the second card I played was a 4 scratch, not only would I claim the 3 and the 5, but my opponents would gain 2 fleas. And play will continue like that until cards are unable to be drawn from the deck, or a player has removed all of their fleas. Both of those trigger the end game. The player that triggers the end game doesn't get another go, but everybody else gets another go, and then whoever's got the most points at the end wins. So you add up your number of cats minus your number of fleas on bracket scoring, bucket scoring, and most points win. So I played this on Board Game Arena. It showed up. It was like news for the day, new game, scratch and catch. So, I'll have a look. Okay, it looks easy. Played it, and I was like, okay, well, that's a game, I guess. Didn't do anything I particularly liked. It was super swingy. I didn't think there was a massive amount of decision space. Just a light filler game. I've played hundreds of them. Got hundreds of them. But then for whatever reason, I had 10 minutes again later in the day. I didn't want to set up R.A.V.E.L again. Went back on and gave it another go. I'm currently like 55 games into it now. I just keep playing. I just keep playing. So I think I only like it, whilst it goes up to 6 players, I'm not sure how much fun that would be. The deck would end quite early on. You wouldn't get much chance to have an impact. Playing it greater than 3 players, you've got very little control over what's going to happen by the time it comes back to you. 2 players is sort of the default, and I think Board Game Geek lists it best at 2. I think it's a little bit too short at 2. Somebody can get a good run to remove a lot of their fleas, which is worth a lot of points that the other player can't catch up on at 2 players. So I think 3 players is my favourite number for it, but I'm happy to play it too, where there is a bit more thinking about what your opponent might have on their turn. Deciding when to flip over a card from the top of the deck is safe, because you've got, let's say there's 3 7s stacked up and you want to get it, you've got a 6 and an 8, you take a card off the top, you hope to hit the 6 or the 8, and then you can steal those 3 points. Just more, I don't know, I like it. It's just a filler game, it's not a long game, but if you're looking for something new to play that's just easy to get along with, give it a go. Then if you don't like it, give it another go, and then you maybe play 50 games of it, same as me, So it was worth a second look. I'm quite enjoying it. It's hard to recommend. It's 6.1, something like that, 6.5 on Board Game Geek, and that's probably true, but some of these games sometimes are deceptively good times compared to their ratings, so I put this in that bucket.
Well, it's sad really, because I don't think I have too much scope for these sort of light little fillers in my diary at the moment. Otherwise, I'd be up for giving this a try. The art looks really cute. I like cats. I like the theme, although realistically, this should be about the irresponsible owners that haven't treated any of their cats or fleas.
Well, the cats themselves are like Elvis impersonators, dancers, debutantes. I feel like they should be responsible for their own.
Listen, I've got 2 cats, and I know for a fact that cats will get up to crazy things. You can't control them. They'll do what they want. But they still have to come home and have their flea treatment. Well, I've got a game that is back in time, back in ancient history. So we're not going to Egypt this time. We're going to Rome. This is Aeterna, a 2025 release from Ares Games. This is a review copy that the publisher sent to me. So this is designed by Martin Wallace, who did Anno 1800, the board game, Tinner's Trail, and something called Brass Birmingham. The artists are Emiliano Mamacari, who has done this, and also Kangansieros, which is another game from Ares Games, and Andreas Rocha, who did Monumental, Set a Watch, Maztec, some stuff for the Call of Cthulhu card game, and also this, and more. So, it's published by Ares Games. It's a 2 to 4 player game. Community says best at 4. I'm inclined to agree. Says it takes 1 hour to 2 hours. This really depends on the table and their loss aversion. We'll get into that. The weight's 3.09, and I'm surprised to find it so much lower than something like Men-Nefer. I think there is less rules overhead, but there is some tricksy elements to this game that are going to really have your brain burning. We'll learn more about that later on. So this is a very high-level overview of the rise and fall of Rome, I guess. Really, yeah, the rise and fall of Rome. The game is middleweight Euro, but yeah, it punches above its weight rating thanks to complex cards, a sort of complex round structure, and curious timings. In the game, you'll play through 3 eras that each follow the same process for turn structure and phases. And once the 3rd era is resolved, there's a small amount of endgame scoring. I reckon you're getting, I say small amount of endgame scoring. It's entirely possible that all of your endgame scoring is negative points. So we'll learn about that in just a minute. But suffice to say, you may get as much as 50% of your points from the endgame scoring, but you should probably have gotten most of your points during the game and, get sort of 10 to 20% at the end game probably. I don't know. I'm not good at this game, so it's kind of hard for me to tell. Anyway, in a given round, what you're doing is it's sort of worker placement and tableau building with some amount of resource management. But there's some curious twists that make it unfamiliar and therefore interesting. But you've got a big board that represents Rome and the 7 hills of Rome. And then you've got a little board where you keep all your resources. There are, of course, the 3 key resources because you're a Roman noble and you're trying to influence the city and influence Rome in order to build great statues and monuments and also send citizens off to war to capture things in your favor. So you've got the 3 resources that are key to this: stone for building monuments, food for feeding your people, and people who need to go off to war and die, which is helpful because then you don't need to feed them. So the game, the phase structure it's probably easiest to explain anything about this game by going through the phase structure of a round, right? It starts with a card draft. This is really the only way to get cards. In a 4-player game, you actually deal out all the cards that come with the game, but at a lower count, some cards are going to be omitted. But every player's dealt 5 cards. They're going to get 2 provinces, which are the wars you can go off and fight, and 3 monuments, which are sort of asymmetrical powers you're going to build into your tableau. So the monuments will sometimes just have an instant effect, giving you some useful things, and sometimes they'll have a tap effect that you can use once per era, and sometimes they will have a passive ongoing ability that triggers at different times, and you'll fit them into your tableau. That's where the tableau building comes from. It's not a big, complex tableau builder like a terraforming Mars or anything like that, a underwater cities. It is a much lighter. I think the vast majority of players in our game had sort of like 7 or 8 cards in their tableau. I probably got the most cards I've ever had in this game, which was 14. So it's not a huge tableau of interlocking combos or anything like that. And many of the cards just trigger once and then they're done. Playing the cards into your tableau will give you these effects, but they'll also give you some amount of resources. This is the provinces, the battles, the wars, they give you the most resources. So that's kind of their function. You play them down, they give you a bonanza of resources. The other cards also give you some small paltry rewards, but primarily you're playing them for their functionality, like their instant effect or passive benefit. So each round begins with a drafting round. Everyone's got 5 of these cards. You're going to draft 4 of them, and then the 4 leftover cards are 1 card per player. The leftover cards go into an open face marketplace that you can then go and play them from. So you can't take those into your hand, but you can play those later on if you get access to them. And once the draft is done, then we're going into the bulk of the round, the round which is the actions. And the actions are functionally just play the cards in your hand or put your citizens out onto the hills of Rome. And what we're really doing when we go out to the hills of Rome is playing an area majority game. Because in a future phase, whoever has the most citizens on a hill is going to get a bunch of victory points. And then there's going to be a second and a third place for other players who are in there. If there's 4 players, there's no 4th place, so someone gets locked out. Sad. And once everyone has passed, so you can have asymmetrical actions, there's a big points prize for passing first. You're also going to get to choose your position in the turn order in future eras, which is somewhat valuable. We debated for a while whether or not it's better to be first or last, and there's definitely pros and cons to both. Being somewhere in the middle is probably the least good, like second or third, which is interesting. But once everyone's passed and finished their actions that they wanted to do, then we'll go into the points awarded for the hills. So you're doing this sort of little area majority thing. And then we go into the next part of this game, which is kind of the spice that makes it really feel excruciating. There's this thing called the unrest track. And playing wars will get you unrest. And your little guy will go up the unrest track. Now it's got 10 steps on the unrest track. And it kind of has 2 functions. One is at some point during this end of round process that we started by scoring the hills, we will also have to pay resources based on our position on the unrest track. And these are expensive to pay. And if we can't pay them, we skip over them entirely, and then we take some amount of doom. So these are just little tokens that you collect, doom tokens. At the end of the game, your unrest token is going to move sideways from the track it's on onto a smaller track called the doom track. And based on its position there, you will lose victory points. If you're at the very bottom of the unrest track, you'll move sideways and you'll lose nothing. If you're at the very top, you'll move sideways and you will be disqualified from the game and you cannot win because you've got too much unrest. Additionally, once you've moved laterally, you will then have to move up 1 space on the this end game track, this doom track, for every doom you accumulated during the game. So if you didn't pay off those resource costs, you've got the doom tokens, and now these are propelling you up that track, increasing your negative score penalty or potentially even disqualifying you from the game. And so managing your unrest, really, really, really important. You don't want to go out. You don't want to lose a bunch of points. You don't want to pay all those extra resources either. So this is an interesting mechanism. Now, going back to scoring the hills, the next step is that the most populated hills will revolt. And this is a really weird mechanism again, because so whichever hill has the most people on will rise up. And I'm not going to explain the rules in full. Suffice to say that the number of uprisings you'll have at a bare minimum is player count -1. So in a 4-player game, 3 uprisings. But where there are ties, these are shared across all tied hills. So you could quite feasibly have many more uprisings than the minimum requirement, based on how the citizens have been placed during the area control game. So there's a real sort of like art to eyeballing where the people are, trying to work out what's going to revolt. And this is why playing last in turn order can be really valuable, because you can eyeball where these ties are and potentially mitigate them if it's not going to be favorable. Because whoever won the hills is like the governor of the hill. And they got the most points just now in the previous step. But now they're going to suffer unrest but if their district revolts. And so they're going to go up that unrest track. Whoever got second place didn't get as many points, but they don't take any unrest penalty. So sometimes positioning yourself as that second place winner is actually much more valuable because you're not going to go up the unrest track. And oh boy, is this really painful. And then additionally, if it revolts, it destroys the highest value score position for that hill. So over the course of the game, these hills are just disappearing. And at the end, in the final era, there's going to be far fewer points available. So you're like, oh, I really need to win the hills now, early on, to get the points before they all vanish. Oh no, everything's rebelling, and now I'm going to be disqualified. It's really rough. Anyway, after you've accrued unrest for governing rebelling districts, then you'll get some small benefits from some buildings you might have built. Don't worry about it. That's minor. And then the next thing is all the people are going to come back to your board, and you have to feed them. And so you have to have enough food to feed everyone that you have on your board. And then we're basically going to do some cleanup and reset for the next round. It is apparent to me, like, so the thing about Martin Wallace games is there's usually some weird mechanism. In London, it's the pollution. When you trigger the tableau, you generate a bunch of pollution, and people are like, oh, you probably only want to trigger your tableau like 2 or 3 times per game, so you don't get too much pollution. There is a viable strategy in London where you trigger your tableau like all the time, and then you can like sort of manage pollution by going above the amount. Or whatever. You know, it's been a while since I've played London, but there's definitely a lot of weird things you can do with pollution in that game. The Brass Birmingham is a game where you can have income and gain income round to round, or it's a game where you can have no income and coast by taking loans constantly. And although it might not seem like a very efficient use of actions, it can be if you play into that as your main strategy. It's really strange, but it's got these sort of disparate strategic pathways. So I tried to play Aeterna as someone who would play it very risky with the unrest. I was like, all right, I'm going to get a bunch of unrest, but then I'm going to get rid of it, and that's going to be fine. It wasn't fine. You can't do that. This is not a game where that strategic option is not on the table. You must try to manage your unrest and keep it low. Those resource payouts will cripple you. You will take a bunch of unrest, and then all of the resources you might have gained by taking that unrest, you will then pay out because you have the unrest, and you'll still have the unrest, and now you'll have no resources, and you'll be really sad. Or you'll just take a bunch of doom, and then you'll be disqualified at the end of the game. Like, you've got to manage your unrest. It is not optional. So that's what I meant when I said the game time really depends on players' loss aversion, because this is a game where if you don't manage your logistics carefully enough to feed your people, control your unrest, and make sure that everything sort of stays manageable, it will very quickly get out of hand. Because of course, for every person you can't feed, you gain 2 unrest. And once you start hitting the top of that unrest track, you just start losing points. It's awful. Anyway, the point is, if players have a real serious loss aversion, they're going to get real bad AP while they sit and try and work out everything that's going to happen and the order in which it's going to happen and how that's going to, play out. And there is enough logistical roots in this game that it can be quite difficult to plan or anticipate exactly what's going to happen. And sometimes, quite frequently actually, you might have some cool card you're going to play, but you just can't play it. Because here's another counterintuitive heuristic. Like, sometimes you just don't want citizens. I remember at one point in our game, a player asking me like, hey, I want to play this card, but I've got all of the citizen pieces in my play area. So I guess I won't gain any citizens, right? And I had to look it up in the rulebook, and it's like, no, I'm afraid your citizens are not component limited. We'll have to use an alternative. And they were like, no, I can't have any more citizens. I can't feed them, and I won't know what to do with them. And it's like, yeah, you'll win all the area majorities, but it won't matter because you're going to be disqualified because you can't feed all your people. So you'll have to have a war where they'll all go off to die. The problem is when they all go off and die in the war, that generates a bunch of unrest because people are unhappy about the war and their loved ones dying. So a really crazy sort of game. It really feels like this older Euro. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got area majority. It's got worker placement. It's got tableau building. It's got some amount of player interaction. When I say that, realistically, we had a pretty solid leader in our game. And probably we needed as a table to do more to scope out what they were doing in hate draft. But there's so much going on and so much to think about. And you've got so many fires that you're putting out that the idea that I was going to look at their tableau and be like, oh, I need to hate draft this. You only get 4 cards. I don't have that much scope. And I need all of them. So, realistically, we needed to do something about that player. But I don't necessarily know exactly what we could have done or how we could have done it. But it does feel like a very interactive game. And it does feel like a game where you've got tools to do things about players. And it's just got that really sort of old school Euro, everything's on fire, nothing's in my control. I'm just kind of managing. There's, how do I get anything in this game, kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, interesting. This one hasn't been on my radar at all. I mean, I do like some Martin Wallace games, but he's not a designer necessarily. I'm looking for his next release to go and play. I find it interesting, this sense of unrest and disaster and doom. It seems to be a theme running through games recently. I don't know if it's always been the case. Certainly, managing outcomes and managing resources and managing negative effects has always been a thing, but I think it's much more apparent in a lot of games these days, from Empire's End, spoke about John DeClaire, to what's the other game I was thinking of while we were chatting?
You might have been thinking of Moon Colony Bloodbath.
Oh, yeah, definitely that one. Wasn't what I was thinking of another Brown Euro, something, but something fairly modern. And I don't know whether that's a trend in gaming. A game like that has to work a lot harder for me to enjoy it. I think, yes, this risk averse, this resource loss averse, just style of play is less appealing to me than building something up. And having something at the end that, really good. Certainly being eliminated for being the worst at something or reaching the end of a track's, something that's occurred in games throughout, and so managing it is important. It's a little disappointing to hear that, one strategy is shut off to you, but as long as there's other things you can be doing, could be interesting. You can. I was looking at the rules while we were chatting as well. I see you can ditch a card to remove 2 unrest, but I presume that your cards are too precious to want to be doing that.
Yeah, so I do think that you will have to make tough choices. I did what I typically do in these sorts of games. It's a problem I have in games like Race for the Galaxy as well, where I just want to play all my cards and I don't really care about the cost. And in this game, I can't really be doing that. So
that's why I lose Agricola most of the time. It's like, yeah, I'll play all these. But none of them get me points or anything. So.
Yeah, so why have I done that? Or I've taken a huge amount of unrest to play this card and it's gotten me like 4 points, but now I'm going to be disqualified from the game. So what was the point of that? So it does really ask you to be really savage about how you evaluate these things and prioritize them. And so, yeah, there are some tools at your disposal for dealing with these things, but I think fundamentally, like, it's interesting because it's got a lot of these familiar mechanisms, but they're sort of in their lighter versions. And actually, I think what the game's really asking you to do is sort of player interactive stuff. There's no direct interaction really. Like, you can hate draft and you can play into the hills that someone else is trying to win. You can play into hills where they're present or leading to try and raise the citizen count, so they will suffer unrest for being the governor of that region if it goes into turmoil or rebellion, whatever they call it. So, it's very sort of passive aggressive ways of stabbing some players in the back, and I think that's really interesting, and I think it's good. I think part of the problem I was seeing was that our leader had the most citizens and had the most food, and because they were managing their engine reasonably well. And so that meant that we were struggling to be able to do anything about that because they were playing last. They had a lot of control over which regions were going to go into turmoil and stuff like that. So I really like this game, to be clear. Like, I don't have much of a problem with risk aversion in many ways, or loss aversion. I find that an interesting dynamic, as insofar as I find anything else interesting. And obviously I'm a bit of a natural gambler anyway, so I always like these high stakes things. My concern with this game, really, because I really liked a lot about it. I really like the mechanisms. I am surprised it has flown as under the radar as it has, given that it's got pedigree, right? Like, Ares is a reasonably well-established publisher. They do reasonably good productions. Most of their games are nice productions. I don't have any real complaints about Ares. And this is from a well-known designer, and it's got a reasonably popular theme, ancient Rome, and it's a Euro-esque game. Like, so I'm surprised and I read the reviews on BGG, and a lot of people were complaining it felt like too light, or like it was missing a mechanism, which I don't get at all. If anything, I would have thought that, the complaint would be, this game has too much downtime because everyone's panicking that everything's going to fall apart. That would be the main complaint I would have expected to see. So I'm a bit baffled by the reaction to the game and how it's flown under the radar. I think it's doing a lot of interesting things. I'd be happy to play it a bunch more times. My only real concern is that one, it might be difficult to get to the table. As you say, if people are very concerned about sort of loss or not being able to build something up. Now, you do get a sense of building something up. You are building a tableau. And the unrest meter doesn't impact what you've built in your tableau. You're not going to lose cards from your tableau. Having said that, you will maybe find yourself in a position in an Era 3, if you've not managed your unrest well, where you're like, I've got 4 cards. They're all great because they're these Era 3 cards and they're the best cards. But now I have to ditch like 2 or 3 of them just to get this meter into some, manageable state. So my chief concern really is that even after a few games, especially if you're not playing with the same group consistently, is that there could be sort of a runaway leader every time that's, even going into Era 3 is sort of uncatchable, and you just don't, there's not enough tools in your arsenal. Like, it's almost like the failure is too compounding, right? That would be my concern. It's not manifested as a repeated thing yet, so I need to play the game a few more times to see how that bears out. But I'm happy to do so because I do find it interesting.
Yeah, certainly, like, if it is a thing that can happen, players just need to be aware of it earlier in these sort of style of games, and so repeated plays often prevent that from becoming a repeat occurrence. But you do need to have, as you say, the right tools in your toolbox to have those sort of interactions and to be able to rein somebody in. And hopefully that does bear out at unrepeated plays. But yeah, I don't know why. I've never seen this other than you mentioning it previously. Nobody else is talking about it. Like I say, it has flown under the radar. But maybe people should give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if that sort of thing, or if this sounds like something you're interested in, if you like this sort of high stakes, I don't want to call it like very classic Euro, because when I think about the very classic Euros, you know, I really think about stuff like Hansa Teutonica, which is actually not that old, it's 2012, but also Tigris and Euphrates, both of which are way more directly confrontational than this game.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have that vibe of, you know, being confrontational and a lot of player interaction, and then sort of very tight mechanisms and savage economies. So if that kind of thing appeals to you, this could be an interesting one for you to check out. It's definitely not for everyone, but I don't think you're going to necessarily regret, you know, picking it up. The other thing, as a side note, on the topic of sort of who it's for and also what kind of group, and that idea of a runaway leader sort of thing, I was thinking about how in the 4-player game, every card is used. Now, don't talk to me about the personalities. I'm aware we only play with 2 and there's variety in the personalities, but they're such an afterthought. What I'm thinking about are the provinces and the monuments, and in a 4-player game, every single one will come out. And my knee-jerk reaction was, it's a shame there's not more than we need so we can have a bit of variety there. But I do wonder if that's, and to be fair, at the 3 and the 2-player game, there will be some variety because you won't see all those cards. But I really get the sense that this feels like it was designed for at least 3 players or 4 players. There is no solo mode either, by the way. So what's interesting is that it feels almost like it wants to, by design, be a game that has all the cards in it. So you can learn them and you know exactly what's coming out, and you get to understand the combos that people can make, and you're like, okay, I know that I can't let them get this card and that card because those 2 cards together are way too good, you know. And so it's a way a way of giving it sort of skill development over time, right? Like there's a skill curve there that you can learn, you can get better at, and then you can utilize that information to do some tactical hate drafting and things like that. So, you know, it does. I do wonder if that's the intention or simply an outcome of creating exactly the right number of cards. I don't know, but it does feel like that could have been intentional, and that might have been the intention there.
Fair enough.
But we're going to take a break from ancient Rome, and we're going to go to the distant future. No, we're not. We're going to go to the distant sideways. It's terraforming the Shire. This is the heaviest game. Is it the heaviest? I don't know, actually.
I don't know if it's significantly heavier than what you've been talking about. Should we click on the link and find out? He did say it was a departure from Rome, but perhaps not as much as you might think.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a 4.08, making it the heaviest game of the podcast.
A real big boy game. So this is Legends of Void. So this is published by Toyd Games, or Tuoid Games. It is designed by Toyd Games, or Tuoid Games. The art is by Toyd Games, or Tuoid Games. Not a lot of information out there on this one, but I think it's just a couple of designers who have put this together and published this. They then published their second game in the same kind of universe. But this game is something that I mentioned in passing last week and described it as terraforming Mars fantasy version. And that's kind of true and kind of not true, but I've now received the game and I've played it a few times solo, but at 3-player and 4-player also. And the best way to describe it is probably pretty much direct from the publisher description. So this Legends of Void, again, another game that terrible title.
It just feels like it should be Legends of the Void.
Correct. But anyway, moving on. Right, Legends of Void is a 1 to 4 player strategy game based on hand management, engine building, and area control mechanics. You play a hero leading a faction in the battle against the Void. And the Void has summoned Seraphs, godlike creatures who threaten the Outer Lands by draining its life. Players have a common goal: banish all the Seraphs from the Outer Lands, but you compete with each other to gain the favour of Lumen, the flying city of the Eternals. So that is the story behind the game. The theme does bear out to some degree, but the world building leaves a little to be desired, and I will talk about that in just a moment. So the game flows very much like Terraforming Mars, and if you're listening to a 2-hour plus podcast on board games, I'm going to assume you know a little bit about Terraforming Mars. But very broadly, players are going to generate income, they're then going to draft and purchase cards, they're then going to play cards, many of which have requirements that will help them gain resources and income or enable special actions they can take. Players are going to spend those resources to change the terrain on the board, which helps with scoring and income, and that's going to repeat until the game ends, at which point whoever has the most points wins. So that is true of both games. But what I'd like to focus on is kind of what's different between the two games, and particularly what Legends of the Void brings to the table that you might not get from the Terraforming Mars, which it is very much based on. Right, the mechanisms are nigh on identical across both games, but how they kind of interact is quite different, and there's additional elements in Legends of Void which make it that heavier weight. So the first thing I want to talk about is the board. Now the board in Legends of Void is a 6-section circle, and that is created from 8 double-sided segments, which gives the game more variety than Terraforming Mars's maps, which are fixed, and you have to buy a new map every time you want to do something slightly different. I think there's like 7 different maps in Terraforming Mars now, but 8 double-sided boards, of which you're using 6 in any given game, is a lot of variation out of the box. Ultimately though, very negligible difference in most of the segments. Only really the mountainous starting area could potentially limit your actions, and you can move around without much problem. So the variety of the board isn't really more than just having a fixed board, to be perfectly honest. But the same can entirely be said for Terraforming Mars. But at least you don't have to buy a whole other set of boards. The main difference, and well, when you say the main difference, but one big difference in this game is that there are heroes. And so in this game, each player selects a unique hero. You'll also get a starting territory, which will tie into one of those boards. They've got exclusive bonuses. You're going to draft gifts, which works very much akin to the prelude cards, which are said as a necessity for playing Terraforming Mars and bringing the playtime down. And with all of that coming together, they say there's over 1 billion combinations of setup in it. But the heroes in this game are physical standees, which are placed on the board, and you move them around, and depending on what you're adjacent to, will allow you to terraform the tiles on the board or attack the Seraphs, which mentioned in the description. And many cards are only playable based on the positioning of your hero, and heroes' actions are a unique resource in this game, and that enables your standee to move around, attack, gather resources, and get around. The movement of your heroes and where you can build tiles is facilitated by all your tiles that are yours count as being adjacent. So if you've got one on one side of the board and one on the other side of the board, and you start your turn on your tile, your first move can be the whole other side of the board. And a number of cards help facilitate this, by allowing you to place tiles not adjacent to an area you already control. So heroes are a pretty significant part of what makes this game different. The other big thing are the Seraphs, so the bad guys of the game. And in this game, the majority of the terraforming is actually done by them. But these are negative terraforming in as much as they are wrecking the world and you're trying to stop them. So at the start of the game, 3 Seraphs have escaped the Void, which is the middle of the board, and are placed out at different intervals, and they're selected from 20 possible antagonists, and again, each of them comes with their own standee. 1 Seraph is going to activate at the end of each season, and that would be equivalent to a generation in Terraforming Mars, and it adds a phase that Terraforming Mars doesn't have, where they move, ruining the landscape behind them. So as they move, they are destroying things you maybe already built, or at the very least, they're leaving a ruinous wake as they move around. In addition, each Seraph has a unique curse, which forces players to sacrifice part of their engine, or sacrifice some resources, or suffer some setback in points. Comparatively, players are going to terraform very few tiles, even at 4 players, but each one that they do terraform in an area will damage a Seraph in that segment, bypassing any of their defences. Players can attack these Seraphs by using hero actions, as I mentioned, but they must be able to generate enough attack to overcome the Seraph's defence, and usually they'll have to pay an additional cost in resources or cards to be able to damage them at all. So if they have a defense of 4, you'd typically have to spend 4 hero actions to do enough damage, but they may have an additional requirement of spending a mithril to hurt them. Some things that are the same is the tableau building. So I mentioned playing cards, and you do the same in Terraforming Mars, but you've got 2 actions on your turn, same as Terraforming Mars. The game is Terraforming Mars. Like I just have to assume that you know how to play Terraforming Mars. I'm going to stop mentioning it. You play 2 cards, or you take 2 actions on your turn, one of which is playing a card into your tableau, either for the immediate effect, or it may provide an ongoing action which you can then take as one of your main actions in a turn. Now, cards in this game are harder to play. Legends of Void cards are also more transient and should be viewed as an additional resource. Once you've played a card in Terraforming Mars, it kind of stays out on the board. In Legends of Void, often it is a cost or a curse to lose a card that is in your tableau. And so you've got a much more manageable set of cards, and you're not just building up turn after turn after turn. There is a bit of ebb and flow as to what you have and what you can do. Now, having a look at the cards, about 70% of them in Legends of Void have a requirement for playing. And that can be a positional requirement. Either your hero has to be next to something, or on another player's piece, or something like that. Next to Seraph, next to the Void, next to a certain resource. Or you require a certain number of tags. In Terraforming Mars, around 40% of your cards have certain requirements. There's a much broader base of cards that you can play for at any point in the game. So it can be a lot harder to get started in Legends of Void. Now, the game does have a way of stacking the deck so that the easier cards appear first, but if you're playing just the full, normal, expert level game, all those cards are shuffled together and dealt, and you have to deal with the draft to get the cards that you want and something that you're able to play. This can be problematic in all games that require sort of drafting and to get the combo pieces and the engine pieces that you need, but it is quite pronounced in this game. And as I mentioned, the cards that you've played often need to be sacrificed. Often an additional cost for a card is to sacrifice a certain tag that's on a card you've already got in your tableau, and that does mean that these sort of tag engines never really build out of control. It is entirely possible to get to the end game, or in the end game, to have a whole bunch of action cards that you can do something with, but you're never really looking at 30, 40 cards out at a time. Should be much more manageable, maybe 20 in a big engine. Then, not content to incorporate mechanisms from one TM initial game, Legends of Void also include the bonus cards from Terra Mystica. So at the end of the round, once you pass, you'll get a pick of the remaining cards that are there, same as Terra Mystica, which will provide an additional resource or income on your next income phase, but do provide tags as well. So it's one way of getting around not having the right cards. There are tags on these bonus tokens that you could have transiently for the round. Then the end game for Legends of Void is also very definitive. Terraforming Mars might go on forever. People don't do the terraforming. They just play with their floaters and their microbes and their animals, and they never actually terraform a bit of the planet to end the game. Not going to happen in this game. The games are a fixed length, a fixed number of turns based on the number of players, and that's all the time you've got to achieve your goals. But this is coupled with a duel ending, right? So the game can resolve in two different ways. Either the players defeat all three of the seraphs on the board, in which case your lumen rating, your terraforming rating, is added to the points earned from the 3 endgame scoring conditions, plus any points on your cards. Very few of those. Or, if they fail to defeat all the seraphs, whoever has the highest lumen rating is the winner. So just based purely on your terraforming rating, no endgame scoring, no card points, no engine points from there. So there's a little bit of a push and pull towards hurting the seraphs, because every time you manage to hurt one, you increase your lumen rating. And that's the only way to increase your lumen rating. That affects your income, and it affects the potential endgame scoring. The balance is how far ahead can you get on damaging the seraphs while still working on towards the endgame scoring, versus at what point can you give up on the endgame scoring and you think, well, we're not going to do it now, so I just want to focus on getting a few points. But the more you hurt the seraphs, the closer you are to getting endgame scoring. It's quite interesting how that works, and from the games I've played, it's very balanced towards it being uncertain on that final turn. It always seems possible, because the build-up of what you're doing ramps up towards the end. So whilst you've only done minor damage until those last 2-3 turns, you're able to do a lot more in those final turns, and it can go one of two ways. And so have you done enough for the endgame scoring, or have you got far enough ahead on the damage that it doesn't matter? So there is a clever endgame mechanism where the final card in the deck, you don't know what it is, but it does between 0 and 3 damage to a final seraph. So even if you kind of get close, but the player who's in the lead's like, oh, you're never doing it, I'm going to give up now, I'm so far ahead, it doesn't matter. It can be that there's still that little bonus damage at the end. They never know 100%. If you can get it within 3, there's always a chance. Usually it's 2 or 1, but there's a 3. And additionally, scores in this game end up being around about 30-40 points in multiplayer. In solo, I've been closer to 80, because you get extra turns, and so that building up of the engine really matters. But it's much more manageable, and you can kind of make a very educated guess about how many points people are going to be getting, and how many, where you can perhaps beat them, and whether or not it's worth it going to kill those seraphs. So it's a much more interesting end game, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. That said, the game does still last an hour per player, and you can get that down a little bit, but not too much.
Mm-hmm.
So the theme, which we spoke about, the theme is generic fantasy, but much, much worse, because it's every generic fantasy. Seraphs are pulled from existing pantheons, but every pantheon. So there's Hades, Fenrir, Ares, going back to Rome, Set, Moloch. These are all potential seraphs that you can get during setup. Then the world of Lumen itself contains gnomes, elves, fairies, dwarfs, leonin, Eastern and Western influenced humans, everything. Even the resources are tropey, with mithril and mana, but then they inexplicably use genasi as leaves. And instead of creating forests, you create vitae. And instead of having damaged terrain or wastes, you've got nihil. And it's like they've got this weird combination and mashup of where they're trying to push into something that is unique to this game, whilst taking everything, including the kitchen sink, in as well, and it just makes it really hard to have an idea of what's going on in your head, necessarily, or build a picture in your head, and particularly when they use the words that you're unfamiliar with, compared to the 80% of the game that you are familiar with. They just would have been better off going one way or another, I think, with that one. The engine building and the tableau building I mentioned is made up of tags and cards, or tags on cards, I should say. There are 14 different tags in this game. I can't remember how many's in Terraforming Mars. I think it's comparable. But the only place that they're all mentioned is a single page in the rulebook. And there's nothing on the player aids. So good luck figuring out if you have an Arcana or an Enchant tag, or what a Witchcraft tag looks like, or a Chaos tag. It doesn't take too long to figure it out, but it is an extra step that doesn't necessarily have to be there. The pictures of those tags could easily be put on the text when it's referencing them, and they mostly chose not to. Then the choice to use the word area to refer to a tile you control. When the segments are areas, then they're referred to as regions. Okay, fine, I get that. But then they refer to the outer lands, which is also used in the mythos, like the world building element of the game, but it also just refers to anywhere on the board. But when it says do something on the outer lands, you're always confused as to whether there's an inner lands, or if it refers to certain segments or certain areas of the tiles, the board that's out. And so just that came up a number of times when we were playing. The art overall is pretty consistent and pretty great, but the writing and the graphic design is a little lackluster. The text is tiny. You got to squint to see what's going on. Like, what special tile is that showing a picture of? You got to go rummaging around to try and find it. Every card has flavor text on it, like a line or two of flavor text at the bottom, but it's even tinier than the main text on the card, and it just eats up space that should be used for function. Some cards are full art for no good reason, and just text on the full art. All in all, like an odd graphic design choice, not easily parsable at a glance. Sure, you probably only care what you've got in your own tableau, but it does make it difficult to kind of see what other people are up to, and this game is a bit more interactive than Terraforming Mars specifically. And so in terms of actually learning and playing this game, the rulebook is 40 pages. Right? And I showed you the back of one of the rulebook, and it is dense. Now some of those pages are full art. Right?
Yeah, that's what you showed me. You showed me a pair of pages with like 0 pictures, and I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah. And it is a lot to go through, but to its credit, whilst not everything is in a super logical place, there is an index, although just generated automatically anytime a word is mentioned, whether it's in the story or whether it's a functional element of the game. The page number is referenced at the end, but it does mean it's harder to look up what you're looking for when it sends you to a story page and not a rule page, but fine. Anything I've been unsure of does have an answer somewhere, right? And it's not always been findable until after the game's finished, but it is in there. And so if you are willing to go through that rulebook a couple of times, or play a game and come back and look through the rulebook again, you will find your answer. I've not found anything that's not been in there fully yet, apart from one card that I've already forgotten. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the game. It is Terraforming Mars. You are the whole mechanisms, the resource, the spending the resources that you're generating, the income tracks for those resources, the conversion of types of resources, so energy to heat within Terraforming Mars, and this one goes from mana to dark matter to leaves, right, Ganassi, for some reason. Leaves are not their own resource. They've got unique resources like your hero actions, and your hero actions are super important because your hero can go out and gather more resources for you. The magic number in this game is 7. You can convert 7 money into any other resource. You can convert 7 mithril into a stronghold, 7 mana to close a portal, 7 dark matter to restore a wasteland, a nihil, 7 ganassi to make a vitae, and that is the magic number. And so this game does benefit from knowing a lot of the weaknesses of Terraforming Mars and has incorporated them straight in, right? So they've already got the variety in the maps. They've already got the prelude cards, so that the quick setup, so you've got more going on right at the start. It's not perfect, in as much as where I'm saying with there been games where none of us have had a good opening hand to have cards to play, because all of them require something and we can't get anything down with them. The drafting element, which can be a weakness in both games, it is still present here. You might not get what you want, you might not get what you need to get going, and then you fall behind the people that do have their engines, and that's just through luck of the draw at times, but also, if the cards just don't come up for the draft. There's so many cards, even in 4-player I've not got to the end of the deck in a game. There's just more variety in the box for this one. So it's got some of the same weaknesses. It's taken a lot of what was good about it. It's added its own spin on it, and the mechanisms are the same, the actions are different, and the feel of the game is quite different as well. It is quite good, but it is hard to recommend fully with some of these sort of problems still evident. So most players I've played it liked it better than Terraforming Mars. People are like, yeah, actually that's got more going on, that's quite interesting, I really like that. I wasn't a big fan of Terraforming Mars, they've liked this. One guy hated Terraforming Mars, loves this. So it's the same mechanisms, very much the same mechanisms. You'll be up and running in hardly any time if you understand Terraforming Mars, but it is a different game using those same mechanisms to power different actions. So everybody that I played with said they'd be happy to play again. I've played the solo game 2-3 times. It's much more fun out of the box than the chase your score version of Terraforming Mars. I've not really played the Aeterna expansion for Terraforming Mars too much yet, but that was fun as well. But it's still available to get. If you want it, you have to go into GameFound. You have to do a late pledge for their other game and add it on.
Okay.
So Fall of Lumen, is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay. But in the same universe, right? But what universe is that? You've just cobbled it together from other people's universes.
The Lumenverse.
Oh yeah, that's never going to take off. But yeah, you can go in late pledge and just add this game. It's a little bit of faff, but direct from publisher. I don't think it's ever really been picked up in retail, but they do still have copies, and I just purchased mine that way. Got it shipped direct. I mean, if you like this game, you very probably will like Terraforming Mars. As I say, one person hated Terraforming Mars, loves this. Most people have actually said they like this better. And I get that feeling. I enjoy some of the purity of Terraforming Mars to some degree, but I do have a good time playing this. You may enjoy Terra Mystica. It's got sort of area control elements, which is always a scoring feature should you defeat all the Seraphs in this game, as well as those start of turn bonuses, which are just lifted wholesale. So again, share some features and mechanisms. It is a heavier game. It is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if I've not played Terraforming Mars, do I get this first?
If you've played, you don't need to have played Terraforming Mars. It's just it is the 4th best rated game, and everybody's probably had at least seen it at this point. That's in the hobby. Possibly. If you can overlook whilst it is a fantasy terraforming Mars, the actual fantasy elements are not the strongest features. The strongest features are what it adds to the terraforming Mars formula. Mm-hmm. The uncertainty of the end, but the definitive end is good. And like I say, it's always come down to that last turn. Yeah, maybe we can, but only if everybody goes for it. But some players might not want to go for it because they've got a 3-4 point lead. But if we go to endgame scoring, they're getting nothing. So there's a couple of cards that can heal Seraphs that they've maybe held on to play. But then again, if everybody else is hitting the Seraphs, they might be overtaken in points, and then they have to come back in to hurt them, which may take it to an end game that does the full scoring. So it's always been... I've had games that have ended both ways, whether we've done it and whether we've not. And each time it's been uncertain. So it does have that kind of climax to it. But the games in which we've not done it, some of the players have struggled to get their engine going. And so that's just not been fun from that other side. I don't know. I think Terraforming Mars is a more straightforward game. It's still complex, right? It's still relatively complex, particularly with the dozen expansions. But you might, if you like heavy games, you prefer a fantasy theme, you like just having everything in one box off the bat, this game could be for you. But it is... I don't know. Yes.
Well, I think it's sort of what you're saying, right? Like, I think if you like Terraforming Mars and you've played it to death and you're super familiar with it, maybe if you want something new, maybe it's worth looking at this. And it sounds like it offers some interesting twists that might be exciting for you. Having said that, if you love Terraforming Mars and you don't feel the need for any more content, then you don't need another game. So why are you listening to this podcast? What are we going to tell you to buy Terraforming Mars again? There's also Legacy of Mars, but you don't want that either because you're happy with Terraforming Mars. Like, what the hell? But the point I was going to make is if you've not played either, the advantages of Terraforming Mars in a way are that, one, loads of people know how to play it. So it's easier to table, and you're likely to find someone who can just teach it to you rather than having to sit down and learn a 40-page rulebook. The other advantage is because it's not all in the box, you can add bits more gently and ease yourself into it, I guess, a little bit better. I mean, there is stuff like Prelude where really it's just better with Prelude and it's no more complicated, so you might as well just buy Prelude. Yeah. But, all the other Terraforming Mars expansions, I could take or leave. Do I like playing with them? Sure. Do I think any of them are must-haves? No. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I would be interested in trying this for sure, but I am also someone who is really into playing new games and trying new systems. So That's just my subjective outlook.
Yeah, I feel like one more pass at this, or somebody else takes this system, or even they take this system and put it into something with a bit more cohesion in terms of theme and a little bit of streamlining, particularly when it comes around to what the engines are that you can build and how quickly you can get them off the ground. I think this would be superior to Terraforming Mars in most ways. I just think it's a little rough around the edges. Everybody's engaged the whole game, but it does go long. I don't see you getting this at 4-player ever under 3 hours. Like, ever. And you might go to an hour a player if everybody's got bits and pieces going. I'm trying hard to remember how long Terraforming Mars takes at 4-player.
To be fair, Terraforming Mars can go that long. It depends a lot on whether you use the drafting variant. Of course, we've mentioned that the drafting variant has become the default way of playing, and that's how everyone plays. But if you don't use the drafting variant, Terraforming Mars can be as quick as 2 hours. But if you do use it, it rarely is less than 2.5 or 3 hours, really. And if it depends on how across it people are. But I've found that just because they're super familiar with it doesn't necessarily mean it goes quicker. because then they're sort of hunting for certain cards and looking for specific combos, and that can all lead to downtime.
Can do more stuff. Yeah. Yeah, the better you are at the game, and same with this one, the better you are at this game as well, you're probably doing more things per season, right? So per generation, and that applies to Terraforming Mars as well, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's so similar, you can't dissociate them, having played one from the other. You might like this better. Give it a play if you can, and it is different enough that I'm probably keeping both, but I would like this would almost be a replacement if it was just slightly smoothed around some of the edges.
Well, there we go. That wraps up this episode of Ready Steady Podcast. We hope you've found this interesting. We hope you've enjoyed it. Have you got anything planned for the future, Barry, you'd like to tease?
Yes, I mean, gaming wise, so getting into RPGs a little bit. There is the one-page RPG Jam. Try saying that 10 times fast. Which I think I'm going to make something for. The theme is growth, and I want to roleplay being a tree. So I'm going to make something around that, and anybody can steal my idea if they want, but my thoughts are I'll have the outline of a tree trunk with a inner ring and an inner ring, and then like each thing you complete, you can draw a ring around, and then so it's from a sapling to a juvenile tree to a strong oak type thing. The only limitations, of course, is you've only got one page to write all the rules on, and so the resolution mechanic I'll have to come up with. But then, what dangers does a tree face? Like as a sapling, you might get eaten by a deer, and then later on there might be a flash floods, or do you get struck by lightning when you're a huge tree? So I'm going to come up with a few things. I think I'll do a one-page RPG jam.
I'm interested to know what the tree can do about any of that.
Exactly.
Oh, here comes the loggers with their axes. But what can you do about that?
Well, you can maybe the happening style. Get up and start fighting back.
Oh yeah. So you're role playing an ent.
Yeah.
Maybe your roots can communicate with Mother Earth and you can control the animals.
There we go. Boom. Get that written down.
All right. So like and subscribe to find out to get your print and play copy of Barry's RPG.
Be like a tree.
Big thanks to all the patrons who support the show, and we are, of course, working on getting this new live stream studio set up. That's going to be very exciting. That is near completion. I'm so excited. I can't wait to start live streaming games again. If you want to get involved in that, you can always check out the Patreon page. Otherwise, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or follow any of those things, which are free to do. All help us out. And check out the main YouTube channel. Mostly it's the podcast at the moment, but content will be returning there. And that's exciting. In the meantime, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you all next time for more games.
Bye!